Okay, so hey guys, and welcome back to another predictions video, and in today's video I'm going to be predicting the Akhmadaliev versus Espinoza fight. And so if you're new around here and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so, like the video if you do indeed like the video, and let's get straight into it. So going into this fight, Akhmadaliev is 12-1 with 9 KOs and Espinoza is 30-4 with 25 KOs. This fight is for the WBA interim World Super Bantamweight title, and Akhmadaliev's last fight was a win via TKO in round 8 versus Gonzalez, that being 2 days off of a year now. Espinoza's last fight was a win via TKO in round 2 versus Ramirez. Espinoza's losses have come versus Roman in 2021, Casemiro in 2019, Ayala in 2017, and Rodriguez in 2016. Akhmadaliev is a southpaw. Akhmadaliev's reach is 68 inches and Espinoza's reach is 62.5. And to speak a bit more about what I've just been saying, like I say, this is for that interim title. It's not the fight in which Akhmadaliev's been wanting, been chasing. Same with Eddie Hearn for Akhmadaliev. He's been seemingly waiting around for the Inoue fight. No real surprise, that's the biggest fight in the division, and you kind of want to get an Inoue fight before he moves on, because I don't think he's going to have many fights. This next fight versus Goodman might be his last fight in this division, so he may have missed his chance now, but he's been chasing him and he's been wanting to fight him, and unfortunately for him, it's not happened. Obviously, he's now cemented himself with this interim title. He's got Espinoza as an opponent, a guy in which is going to be very tough and rugged. It's never something you should write out. A Mexican. He's been very tough, very durable. He's beaten undefeated opponents. He's beaten undefeated Colombian opponents and had success in his career. He's only ever really lost to some top contenders. I mean, Ayala and Rodriguez much earlier on in his career. It's fair enough because a lot of Mexicans do get kind of matched very difficultly early on in their careers, and a lot of the fights earlier on are 50-50 type fights, and they're very tough fights. But then moving on, the Casemiro fight is aged well. Casemiro is somebody who's fought for a world title, I believe has had a world title, and is still ranked very highly and has been often talked about with fighting Inoue. So a very tough guy to beat himself, and it says he lost via KO, but it was a standing knockout. He never actually got dropped again, and so there's no discredit to that. I mean, he did get dropped earlier on in the fight, but then came back up again. I think he has got an excellent chin, Espinoza, so I think it is going to take a lot, and it's going to be a big statement if Akhmadaliev is able to win via stoppage for this one. And then the Roman fight was a very much a slugfest of a fight. It was a back and forth type fight where Roman inevitably was able to have success into the later rounds, but earlier on in it, Espinoza really put it on him, stuck it on him, and definitely won a few of the earlier rounds from doing that. But, like I say, Akhmadaliev has Espinoza as an opponent. It's a tough, durable opponent, but it's like I say, it's obviously not what he's wanting. It's not who he's been wanting. Obviously, he was wanting to fight Inoue. I'm quite glad that he's not waiting around anymore. I think waiting around for opponents can often kill careers because a lot of fighters have waited around way too long for fights and just really dragged it out, and then when they've come back they've been had the ring rust and not looked as good, and their career hasn't propelled with the same momentum in which it could have. And it's nice to say, like I say, to see Akhmadaliev back. He's probably, in my opinion, had a bit too long out. Obviously his team was appealing with his ranking, I believe, with the IBF, that the fact that it didn't get ordered him versus Noe, and instead, of course, he went on to fight TJ Doheny, and it was an interesting fight, and a fight in which nobody was too keen to see. But of course, we saw it happen, and like I say, he's now fighting Goodman, who is a mandatory, and it's not surprising that he is actually fighting him. It was kind of him or Akhmadaliev, but at the same time, I don't necessarily know how much longer he's going to be sticking around in this Division 4. So I'm not too sure if this Akhmadaliev's fight is going to happen. Obviously, like I say, Eddie Hearn was trying to push it as well and was trying to really promote Akhmadaliev as a fighter. I mean, I think it would have been a great fight, him versus Inoue. I think he really could have given him a tough test. And as an Olympic bronze medalist, he's a big name to be in against Inoue, and a much bigger name than that of TJ Doheny. And, at the same time, I suppose there isn't any real rush for Akhmadaliev's career because he's already been a world champion. He's already beaten some top names. Obviously, he had the loss in just the fight before last versus Tapales, which was a close split decision, and I think he just started a bit too slowly. But in general, there's no real rush of his career. Obviously, he's only had 13 pro fights. This being his 14th. Like I say, there's definitely no rush. A lot of Olympic medalists get rushed, perhaps a bit too fast. Maybe we're going to be seeing that, you know, happen more often. With the likes of Pat Brown joining with Matchroom, perhaps we're going to see him progress quite quickly. And like I say, it's interesting to see how Olympians do get progressed. Of course, we have Ben Whitaker as well, who has been progressed quite quickly and perhaps too quickly, and perhaps that's a bad thing for him. But I think maybe the loss and the effect of the loss versus Tapales has been the reason as to why Inoue hasn't wanted to fight him. Perhaps he hasn't seen the reason to fight him. Perhaps he sees it as too much of a risk. Of course, Goodman's an undefeated fighter, so I suppose when you look at it, Akhmadaliev's record, comparing that to Goodman's record, perhaps you're thinking, the Goodman fight makes more sense, like say an undefeated up and comer. But Akhmadaliev, he's a very tough guy to beat, and it's just in general nice to see him fighting for the belt, even though it's an interim belt. Interim belts, I'm not really too sure what the actual purpose of them are anymore, because interim belts originally, or from what I know, was because the world champion wasn't fighting. With boxing, though, that seems to not really, matter. It seems to just be the case of if there is a champion and he's fighting other guys, then just put an interim belt for somebody else who's a top contender as well, which I just find interesting. And it's just a weird thing in boxing. Like I say, there's so many belts and perhaps too many belts, but this is just what the case has been. Obviously, this is an event that's in Monaco. It's a return for Matchroom into Monaco Fight Nights. It's also, I believe, their third or fourth show in a row. They had the Edwards Yafai one, then they have had the Parra vs Hitchens one. Now they have this one in Monaco as well. Monaco cards are interesting cards because they're very professional. They're in a very nice kind of building a lot of the time, a very posh, modern, well, kind of historical, I suppose, type building, and they're typically quite small cards. The atmosphere is, pretty much zero, and perhaps you don't really need to have a big ticket seller to really push an event like this. But it's interesting to see that they always seem to have typically one a year card in Monaco. Last time, the card was quite entertaining. I mean, that I remember Cordina was the main event versus Vasquez, and that was quite an entertaining fight. Obviously, you could have argued that Vasquez could have won, but of course, then Cordina went on to lose. So, it was a good card. I don't mind a little Monaco card, and this is an interesting but good main event. There's also some other good fights on the card as well. You have Cully versus Hughes, which I think, for a British standpoint, is a great fight. Cully has been in some close fights and hasn't progressed, I suppose, in the way in which a lot of Irish boxing fans have probably wanted him to. I think with the momentum that he had earlier on in his career, he definitely could have progressed quicker, but things have happened and it slowed him down. He had that loss, that was a big shock loss, and like I say, in general, things have slowed him down. He's not been able to get to where he wants to be, and he's not coming off, a huge win last time out. But Hughes is coming off a huge win last time out. That was a great stoppage for himself, and you know, perhaps it's meant that he's been able to propel himself back into this kind of position now. Hughes obviously was unfortunate to lose versus Cambosis Jr. with the cards kind of just not going his way, and now with Cambosis Jr. signing with Matchroom, perhaps that fight is a fight that can get made if Hughes is able to go through Cully and go through him in convincing fashion. So it's an interesting fight. I'm not going to give a prediction for it, but I just found that it was an interesting fight. Save for Clark versus Mosquera. Clark's been put on some big kind of European cards and hasn't just been pushed in the UK. It seems like Matchroom want to push and propel him all over Europe, all over the world. But the Mosquera fight is a good fight as well. I believe it's for the European title. So yeah, like I say, another good fight. Some good names on this card, and then another fight in which I am going to give a prediction for is Ferreira versus Buderza. It's a great fight. It's for the IBF World Lightweight title. I think that Ferreira's going to win via majority decision. I think Buderza, I'm not too sure if she's actually warranted or deserving of this title fight. She has a good record, but it's not been too long since she's had a loss, and she's only had a couple fights versus lesser opponents since then. And I think Ferreira, she's another case of an Olympian being progressed quickly. I mean, she's only had 5 fights and she's already a world champion. She was looked very, very dominant and got a destructive kind of stoppage last time out, where she really just beat down Lescano and really battered her, and her face looked mashed up at the end. But I think, like I say, she's going to win. I think it's going to be a majority close decision. I think Buderza is just as aggressive as that of Ferreira. I think she's going to really try match her and into the mid to late rounds, probably frustrate Ferreira or make things difficult for Ferreira. Ferreira, I'm not too sure if she actually did end up going to the Olympics or not. I don't think she did, but I think other things have been on her mind. I don't think she'll be fully focused on this fight, and this often is the case with champions and young champions as well. I think that, like I say, it's going to be a close fight. I think Ferreira's going to win. It's just going to be an aggressive, all-out type war where I just don't know who's going to it's going to sway both ways. I think, but they could the judges are going to give it to Ferreira and perhaps set up a rematch if it's a great fight. But I think this is going to be the first proper test for Ferreira. Going back to the main event, though, of course, Akhmadaliev as a fighter, he typically works angles very well. When you see him at his best, he's pivoting, he's really working angles and moving well. Perhaps that hasn't been so much the case for the past couple of fights, but in general, he is still able to work angles very well. He has great front foot counters, and times he was shots excellently and was able to do that versus Gonzalez, and that's where he was able to inevitably get a great stoppage because of the counters in which he was able to land on Gonzalez, with the excellent timing in which Akhmadaliev has and the power that he's able to utilize with them. Fast hands and the well balanced, timed front foot type counters in which he's throwing. He can fight on the front foot or the back foot. I think he catches shots quite well. I think, he drops his guard a little bit at times, but typically he's quite good at catching shots. I think he's a technically skilled, smart fighter. I'm not too sure if you could say the same for Espinoza, but it's different of styles. He capitalizes upon mistakes like Akhmadaliev. He controls the pace. He's accurate. He's measured. He lets you get confident and then kind of breaks you down and flips that momentum and halts your momentum, and it's an impressive thing to see. He can fight at an in close or a mid range, and he's also spiteful. If he gets you hurt, if he gets you damaged, he's spiteful, perhaps forcing to finish a little bit at times, but in general it is spiteful, his work. And Akhmadaliev, perhaps has been seen as a little bit less of a threat from that Tapales fight. I think that did affect him, and I think he did struggle in that fight, and it took a couple rounds to get into it versus Gonzalez, but inevitably, when he did, he looked very good, and he looked very difficult to be able to handle, and in general, looked like he was back to his, like I say, spiteful self. Negatives about him, I think he's a slow starter. Espinoza can be a very quick starter, and I think that's something that's going to be very interesting to see what happens with that, because Espinoza, if he puts it on Akhmadaliev early, then he could definitely make it difficult for Akhmadaliev if he can't, get his timing down instantly. And we'll have to wait and see what happens. He can be reluctant to throw his left at times, and it seemed like that was the case versus Tapales. He seemed to be reluctant to throw that really good left hook, in which he does have, and if he isn't throwing it, then he's being hesitant and he's just waiting a bit too long. He takes body shots. I don't necessarily know if it hurts him too much, but he catches a lot of the shots to the head, but he takes body shots. He isn't always necessarily able to get you behind his jab. His jab is good, but it's not actually able to actually keep you there, or it's sometimes lost up with accuracy a little bit at times. He can go back in straight lines. Like I say, typically when he's being aggressive, he can work angles and can work pivots, but it just was going back quite a lot in straight lines versus Gonzalez fight, and just wasn't moving or circling as well as what I'd like to have seen. Putting his punches together, like I say again, kind of going back to that reluctancy quite type thing. If he can't pin you down, I think that can frustrate him or confuse him a little bit. He, like I say, can force to finish a bit at times. I don't think he's overly physical. He looks like a very strong guy, and like I say, he has that power, but I don't think he utilises his physicality that much. I think he has to remember the body. I don't think either of them go to the body that much, and I think if Akhmadaliev did, then it could definitely slow down like something like an Espinoza, who is a fast starter. If he went to the body, it could slow him down with the power, like I say, that Akhmadaliev does hold. He sometimes just goes for singular shots over and over again. He seemed to be doing that versus Gonzalez. Of course, it worked, but perhaps he may have been able to get him out of there earlier if he was going for more combinations when he had Gonzalez hurt, because he had him hurt for quite a while. Espinoza as a fighter, he's a come forward type fighter, and like I say, a fast starter, and he's put it on pretty much a lot of the guys quickly. Of course, that Roman fight was a fight in which straight away he put it on Roman and had Roman struggling early on in that fight. And the same in his last fight versus Ramirez. That's how he got the early stoppage. Just that fast, in your face, in close type style. Pure aggression is what I would say. He pushes you back. He has that high output. He gives his all. You can see that he gives his all and is willing to give his all. So it's definitely going to be a tough test for Akhmadaliev, and definitely could be a fight in which he may struggle with and may have problems with. And as I said, you can't overlook a Mexican. It's just the rules, especially when they fight like the way that Espinoza does. He's got good short punches, a good chin as well, so he's probably going to be able to walk through quite a lot of what Akhmadaliev might be able to give him, but we'll have to wait and see if he's willing to do that. He's quite imposing. He's, I think, more fired up, possibly out of the two. Akhmadaliev may be, more frustrated because he hasn't had things going his way, but perhaps he's maybe a little bit down the dumps. Perhaps he's maybe overlooking. I think Espinoza's more fired up than ever, especially coming into this. Perhaps a final chance in a big fight for himself. He's got a powerful overhand as well, in which he is able to land, relatively consistently a lot of the time. And Akhmadaliev's, head movement isn't anything too crazy. Negatives about Espinoza, I think his head's on the line as well. I don't think either of them has good head movement, and I don't think he makes any sort of adjustments at all. Realistically, there was times in which Espinoza tied versus Casemiro, and he was continuously just getting popped with big shots to the head, and he just wasn't reacting. Same versus Roman as well. He kind of let there be a bit more space, and when he let there be a bit more space, he was just continuously getting battered to the head over and over again. He can walk onto shots and was a lot versus Roman and against Casemiro as well. His technical ability, like I say, is nowhere near. His skill isn't anywhere near boxing wise as Akhmadaliev. Like I say, just a differing of styles. He can get caught with the same shots over and over again. The uppercut's something in which lands on him. I also think a lot of fighters can just land consistent hooks against him as well. Boxing at a mid-range, like I say, when he lets off that space and gives off that space, then his actual boxing at mid-range isn't anything too good, and he gets caught a lot. He has a lack of movement. He slows down, I think, at times. He overswings at the same time a bit as well. He can be moved with shots, and Akhmadaliev, if he is able to circle around and move with the big hooks in which he throws, might be able to have success there. I think he, like I say, doesn't go to the body at all, really. And against head movement, I think he can sometimes struggle dealing with head movement. Akhmadaliev is the favourite for this fight, and I think that Akhmadaliev will win via KO in round 7. I think he's going to be able to land and time on Espinoza, and I just don't think at this point in Espinoza's career, after the amount of shots in which he has taken, he's going to be able to deal with the power of Akhmadaliev. Akhmadaliev is possibly going to have to survive an onslaught early on, so it wouldn't surprise me if he ties up early and perhaps even gets knocked down early himself with a kind of like a flash knockdown. But I think inevitably he is going to be able to work out Espinoza's timing. When Espinoza gradually kind of lets there be more distance between the two of them, he is going to be able to break him down, possibly just land them single shots, and I think he's going to get probably quite a devastating knockout in round 7. Then we could go on to fight, of course we'd love to see Inoue versus Goodman for all the belts, the winner of that going on to fight Akhmadaliev. We'll have to wait and see. I mean, if Goodman wins, then Inoue will probably rematch Goodman. If Inoue wins again, then perhaps, this might be the last fight for him. I think he said after the Tapai's fight that he was only going to have 2 more in the super bantamweight division, and, this is his second one now, so we'll have to wait and see. Perhaps Tapai's again. Tapai's has had a bit of time out from the loss versus Inoue. It's been about a year now almost, and so perhaps we could see him versus Akhmadaliev rerun it again. Maybe there isn't as much excitement about it because we saw Tapai's get beat down by Inoue, but perhaps as an option. Same with Casemiro as well. Casemiro was always talked about fighting Inoue, but that doesn't seem to be happening either, so it could be 2 guys against each other in Akhmadaliev and Casemiro, perhaps for a world title if Inoue does move up and vacate them. As like a 2 guys in which should have fought a Inoue type fight, perhaps that could be an option. Or Pierce. Pierce has been, improving well and been rebuilding after his defeat and been looking good on the OTX cards as of recent. And he's only ever lost versus Cabrera and Segawa, 2 guys who have moved on to much heavier divisions from what I believe. Cabrera fought Zepeda at the lightweight division, and I think Segawa also fought Carrington at the lightweight division as well. And Segawa looked very good versus Carrington and brought him to a close fight, and Cabrera did get beat down versus Zepeda, but got himself in that position in the first place to fight that fight. So they're not really bad losses, and they were a while ago. Like I say, and Pierce has looked good since then. So perhaps that could be a good fight as well. If both DAZN type fighters, so maybe that could happen. But yeah, that's it for today's video. Hope you did enjoy. Like the video if you did, like this, subscribe if you're new, and thanks for watching.